What's up, and welcome to Clarity for Parents of Athletes, bringing you stories from professional athletes about their parents and how they were raised. My name is Gabe Nosair from aclearmind.com. All right, and welcome to episode 39. Now, before I get to the guest of this episode, I want to take time and thank you for tuning in, whether it's your first one or you've listened to several or all of the episodes. I really appreciate it wherever you are, and encourage you to please rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcast and to subscribe to it on whatever platform you are listening on or whatever your favorite platform is. You can get a full list of the platforms that I'm on my website, aclearmind.com. That's aclearmind.com. And you can also find out a little bit more about me as well. I'm a transformative life coach. I work with athletes, professional weekend warriors, and I work with non-athletes as well. To describe my work would probably take this whole episode, but you can go back and listen to episode number 1 to listen to a little bit about what I do and who I am. But here in a nutshell, I work with individuals and small groups. I do those virtually on the phone or through Zoom calls. And I also do workshops, and looking forward to doing them again once we get over this physical distancing period of life, which I'm definitely looking forward to that very, very much because I love the workshops that I do, and of course all the individual and small group sessions as well. So if you ever want to find out a little bit more and connect with me, please reach out to me. Again, my website is aclearmind.com, or you can email me, gabe@aclearmind.com. All right, so the guest of this episode, her name is Gina Riley. She is actually Dr. Gina Riley. She's an educational psychologist and clinical professor and program coordinator of the Adolescent Special Education program at the City University of New York in Hunter College in New York City. Dr. Riley has over 15 years experience working with teens and learning disabilities and emotional and behavioral disorders. And her research interests include intrinsic motivation, which is why I wanted to bring her here to talk to you all, I guess not talk to you, but for you all to listen to what she has to say and for myself to talk to her. And she also focuses a lot on self-determination theory, cognitive evaluation theory, homeschooling, unschooling, and other alternative learning environments. And Dr. Riley also has extensive experience in online education and distance learning at the college and university level. And she also has her first book coming out soon in the fall of 2020. And her book is called Unschooling, Exploring Learning Beyond the Classroom. And I'm definitely looking forward to picking up a copy of that because we've been talking about unschooling or homeschooling our son. And I know a lot of parents out there that I see in different groups and that I talk to, they want some way to motivate their child to practice more on their own and to love their sport more on their own. And they have a hard time trying to do that because it's something that you can't force. So luckily I came across Dr. Riley on a podcast called The High School Hamster Wheel, which actually I'm going to be a guest on here in the very near future. And as soon as I saw the words intrinsic motivation, I just had to listen. So I listened and I said, oh, you know what? I need to bring Dr. Riley here on my show. So she talks about a lot of stuff that may be uncomfortable for some people to try and implement because they're so used to something else and they've achieved some success in those other things. And I just encourage you during this episode to listen with an open mind and be comfortable feeling uncomfortable, to maybe implement some of these things and to trust what Dr. Riley is saying, because it could actually benefit your child tremendously to help build that intrinsic motivation. Now, as usual, I leave you with some takeaways after the interview, so I hope you enjoy those where I dig deep a little bit more into something or some things that struck me profoundly from this interview. All right, enjoy. All right, Gina, Thanks for being here. Thanks for your time today. And we're recording this during the coronavirus pandemic. So I feel like it's fitting to ask how your experience is and how everything's going for you, because you're very much near the epicenter of the United States.
Thanks so much, Gabe. It's so nice to be here. We are all in our family well and healthy. And at this point, that is the only thing I am grateful for and the only thing I'm asking for, just continued health and wellness.
Nice. That's good to hear. I'm glad you guys are all well. Now you're a professor at Hunter College. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what department you're in and kind of what you focus on?
Sure. So I am a professor and program coordinator of the Adolescent Special Education program at Hunter College. I work a lot with New York City school teachers, teaching and facilitating them. I also have a research line that's focused on alternative education, including homeschooling, unschooling, Sudbury schooling, and other forms of self-directed learning. So I have my foot in two very different worlds, but it makes it cool and interesting.
Yeah, sounds like it. So, I've heard this term unschooling. I'm sure people who are listening have heard of it, but what exactly is the difference between unschooling and homeschooling?
Yeah, so unschooling is learning without a curriculum. So it's really learning through life, learning through the outdoors, learning through mentors, whereas homeschooling would be more curriculum-based, more assessment-based. I always say, like, unschooling is the learning through the world.
So it's kind of guided by the child's interests, sounds like.
Absolutely. It's all about the child's unique intrinsic motivations and their strengths.
Nice. And that's basically the reason why I asked you to be on this episode, is because of the focus of intrinsic motivation. Because I think a lot of parents are looking for ways to motivate their child in the ways of sports, although it kind of doesn't sound quite right that they're motivating their child to be an intrinsic motivator.
Right. You can't, right. You can't force anyone to be intrinsically motivated. You can facilitate it. You just can't force it.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess, for lack of a better question, maybe you can help me out here. How can parents best help their child become intrinsically motivated?
Sure. So you have to understand that intrinsic motivation and self-determination comes from within. So it's all about the child's intrinsic passions and intrinsic strengths and what the child wants to do. And so, of course, again, like, you can't force intrinsic motivation, although we'd love to, because all sorts of wonderful things come out of intrinsic motivation. But you can facilitate it as a parent. And what I usually use in terms of coaching and mentoring people with facilitation of intrinsic motivation is called self-determination theory. And self-determination theory is a theory written by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan at the University of Rochester. They began it in 1985, and they've written so much about it since. And it's been written about in peer review literature, in sports psychology literature, in health and education, so much. I love self-determination theory, mostly because of its sub-theory, which is called cognitive evaluation theory. And this sounds so like psychology and science-y, but cognitive evaluation theory is really just tenets, and there's 3 of them, in order to facilitate intrinsic motivation. And you can do this in kids, and you can do this in adults. And again, the key word here is facilitation. It's not forcing, it's not teaching, it's true facilitation. So the 3 tenets, or the 3 magic words, as I sometimes talk to my students about, is competence, autonomy, and relatedness. So in order to facilitate a sense of intrinsic motivation in your child, as a parent, you do need to give them elements of all 3, elements of competence, elements of autonomy, and then elements of relatedness. Do you want me to take them apart?
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
Please.
So, to facilitate competence, you really need to focus on your child's strengths. So, if they're super, super good at something, you are going to not only tell them that, but be real specific at what they're super, super good at. So, my son used to be a golfer and a pretty good one. And his drives were like just amazing to watch. And I used to say that to him all the time. I used to say, it's really cool to like watch you drive that. It was just like so beautiful. It was like a succinct move and it was gorgeous. So when you're instilling competence in someone, you're not only affirming what they're good at and what their strengths are, but you're being really specific about it. And so that's competence.
So, allow me to, please allow me to
Yeah.
interrupt for just a
Yeah.
second. So the way you were speaking about your son, it didn't sound like you were rewarding him for hitting a par on a par three, the results. You're focused more on what he was doing, not the outcome of what he was doing.
Yeah. And it really helped that I wasn't like, I'm not intrinsically interested in golf. I'm watching it as a spectator. I didn't have any interest or investment. I mean, what he loves is what he loves. So it really helped that I could step back and take that neutral perspective about it. And I think that's key, right? Sometimes parents are so involved, and sometimes parents are so just like, I want to support my child in every single way that I can. And so sometimes it's important just to be able to take a step back and watch your child enjoy what they're doing. And I think that's all I was doing when he was playing, and he was playing pretty competitive golf. I was watching someone really enjoy what they were doing. And then when it didn't become fun anymore, that's when he stopped.
Huh. Very interesting. So, yeah, it's interesting to try and build this competence. My daughter was a very good water polo player and training at a very high level, and I didn't really know anything about water polo, so I would just basically go and sit there. And I coach soccer, and didn't. I had experienced parents kind of being over the top, so I didn't want to be that parent. So I just kind of sat there. But then she wanted more out of me, and she said, "All you do is just sit there." And so it became kind of tough for me to tiptoe that line of what she was asking me to do versus what I felt was in her best interest, because I didn't want to be over the top.
Yeah. I mean, part of this, right, is like authenticity. It's, praise is competence, right? Like praise always helps competence, and praise is pretty extrinsic. So if you want, I always tell like parents, like, you need to be authentic and you need to be who you are. So if you're the parent that's like, great job, super amazing, that's all great and good. And then maybe add a little extra, like, fantastic job, I loved how you, and whatever they did. Or, wow, it was really great to watch you do this. And that way, like, kids know that you're really watching, as well as like you're really into it, right? Everyone loves praise, and
Right.
myself included. It's a great extrinsic motivator. And although self-determination theory is all about intrinsic motivation, I'll always say that praise is never a bad thing, right? But the key is to give positive, specific praise.
So it seems like specific praise and not necessarily praising the outcome of them doing something is kind of that magic formula.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what about autonomy? What can you tell us a little bit about that and how to create autonomy?
Yeah. So again, you're facilitating and not creating, right? Autonomy is all about free choice. And this is really scary to parents, to teachers, talking about freedom and free choice. But in order for a person to be self-determined and intrinsically motivated, they've got to make the choice to do the task. And so, I mean, this is where you go into this whole conversation about the opposite of free choice, which is forcing someone, either through extrinsic rewards or not. It's really important. I mean, it's really important in life. But it's also important in sports and in health and in education that the child, the teen, is making the choice themselves to do something or to participate in something.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's not their choice, then all the joy is sucked out of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you get burnout, right? Like when all the joy is sucked out, that equals like not wanting to do it anymore or feeling really burned out about it.
Right. So, I have a really good friend of mine whose son plays soccer, but he's not quite into it. So my friend played soccer, and his son is playing soccer, but he says he's not into it. He's more into baseball, but he's said he's been trying to convince him to stop playing soccer, but his son doesn't want to, probably out of an obligation. It's kind of like a family thing. Both his uncles played soccer, and so if my friend is asking his son essentially, do you want to keep playing, and he says yes, but my friend's getting the sense that he's just saying yes out of obligation. What kind of advice would you have to parents who may be in that similar boat as well?
A lot of us say yes because of obligation. And I think kids especially, right? Because they want to please their parents. In my son's case, he played golf probably way longer than he should have because my dad was so proud of him. And really, his whole identity was in his grandson golfing. And it took a while for him to get the courage and the bravery to say, this is not for me anymore. And so sometimes like having the courage to make autonomous decisions does take a while. In unschooling, we call this part like deschooling. So in order to be able to embrace the freedom, you have to have a period of rest, or you have to have a period of thought, or you have to have a period of relaxation where you don't do the thing for a while. And then finally you go in and you say, wow, I have like a lot more choices than I think I do. Yeah. That's the hard part though, right? The hard part is the period of rest and relaxation and thinking. Right. But really, once kids have that, they realize, maybe I'm not really that into soccer, and maybe I really do want to play baseball. Or maybe, golf has been really good to me for like years, but it's not my thing anymore. It takes a ton of courage to do that because sometimes our identities are so shaped into what we do and what we're good at.
Yeah, for sure. And that leads to what we love. And that's kind of a big thing to create intrinsic motivation is you have to love what you're doing.
Right. You have to love what you're doing. You have to love it without conditions. And as we know about love, like unconditional love is hard. Anytime you're doing something without conditions that is really, truly coming from your heart, it's just hard.
Wow. So I'm curious what kind of conversations you had with your son, because it seems like you noticed that he wasn't enjoying it, but he was still doing it out of obligation to his grandfather. How did you help your son work through that time?
Yeah, I mean, it was torturous at some point, right? Like it was really, I remember driving him to golf camp many, many days and just being like, do you even like this anymore? Do you even want to do this anymore? And his answer was always, yeah, no, I'm fine. His face looked like he was not fine. But he, like at all, not fine. But he would just be constantly like, I'm fine. I'm fine. And then interestingly for him, it was kind of figuring out another thing that he loved, and that happened to be the guitar. And that interest kind of organically replaced golf in an off season, which I thought was really interesting. Wow. So you had that off season to say, you know what, this golf thing is probably not for me anymore. And so again, brave choice, because there was a lot of pressure surrounding him. There was a lot of familial, like, you're so good at this, right? And like excitement. And my dad loved to go to golf tournaments. And there was just a lot of pressure. But again, it was a conversation, but it was also just him having that off season and that period of rest and relaxation where he got to explore other interests. And I think that's where he would tell you, like, that's where he found his true love and his true passion.
Wow. That's great. So how young can we as parents start to give our children choices? And, if it's at a younger age, is the autonomy and the choice at a younger age different than you would if it was like a teenager?
I am a really big fan of giving kids choice as young as possible. We talk about this in toddlers a lot, right? Do you want this or do you want this? And it's usually a choice between two things. And it's usually something simple like, do you want an apple or do you want a banana? As much choice as you can give kids, the better, because in giving them choice, they learn to A, make decisions, which is a real huge thing. And B, they learn to think about choices, right? So sometimes kids just like pick, right? I don't care. I'll just take the pizza, But sometimes if you have practice making choices, it's more of a, what do I feel like more, right? And that's a real feeling. So I'm a big fan of giving choice as much as possible, as soon as possible. And again, it's just because with those choices, the more practice you have making choices, the better you are in terms of decision making. And that skill is really important later on.
So how do you feel if parents raise their children to be autonomous and then the child is at school, let's say, or a job in the future, and they don't necessarily have choices and they have a difficult time adjusting? How do you think parents can help their children with seeing kind of like, hey, yeah, you do get some flexibility in your life, but right now you don't get this flexibility at school or at your job?
Yeah, I mean, I think kids can balance. We give kids less credit than they probably deserve. I think kids can balance both the choice and the you get what you get and you don't get upset kind of thing, right? I really think when, we're afraid of choice because we're afraid like, well, what happens when they get out in the quote unquote real world and they have to do something? And the truth is, the real world is full of negotiation and choice. And yes, there are places and there are things that we have to do. We have to make a living. We have to, pay the rent or pay the mortgage. And of course, there are things, but there are many different ways to do that, right? If COVID has given us anything, it's given us the fact that we could lose everything that we know of. And so it's time to really think about like the alternatives.
Yeah.
And so again, like you're not creating a monster when you give choice. Instead, you're creating a really good adult that's going to be able to make good decisions for themselves.
That's fantastic. All right, so on to the third part of the cognitive evaluation theory of relatedness. What does that mean?
Yes, this is my favorite part. In order to foster a sense of intrinsic motivation or to facilitate intrinsic motivation, a person has to feel a sense of relatedness. And this means having one person that has their back no matter what. No matter what is the key, right? It's like unconditional love and unconditional support. No matter if you play soccer or not, no matter if you play baseball or not, no matter whatever you do. That relatedness is really, really key, because if you know that someone has your back, then you are more apt to really do what feels good and what you love. You're more apt to do what intrinsically motivates you. If you know that, mistakes are okay and that someone will be able to support you and pull you through. So that part is important. Parents are super good at this. Parents are super good at unconditional love, and they're super good at unconditional support, because I think this is what we feel when we see our child for the first time. But then as we watch our kid grow, it becomes almost like there's kind of a competitive feeling to this, right? We want our kids to be as good as the kids next door or whatever. So that unconditional love and support gets tested sometimes. But I really think it's important for all kids, no matter what, whether they're in the sports arena or in the educational arena, all kids just have that one person that has their back no matter what.
And I imagine that, children do things, and sometimes parents, I know I've experienced this, that we have an automatic reaction of frustration, or we get emotionally, intensified. I imagine that can make the child feel as if they're not loved unconditionally. So what do parents need to do to kind of lower their reactions when the mistakes do happen?
Listen, we're human and we all have those reactions, right? Naming a perfect parent, they're lying, right? No one has ever been the perfect parent. We all have these reactions. And so I think it's also important for parents to know how to sit with their child after that reaction and say like, hey, I reacted this way because of this. And usually the because comes from a place of care and comes from a place of unconditional love. Like, I loved you so much and I just want you to be happy and I just want you to be able to get a scholarship for college, right? Because I love you so much. And it's really, that's the conversation piece. It's really important for parents to be able to have honest conversations with their kids. It's really important for kids to be able to have honest conversations with their parent. And those honest conversations only come when parents, also as the adult, know how to say, listen, I reacted poorly, right? I should have reacted this way. Or even an acknowledgement of feeling like, I know you didn't like when I reacted that way. Mm-hmm. That kind of was my natural inclination, but I know you didn't like it and I know you were hurt by it. And I just wanted to like tell you that. It's hard. Mm-hmm. So hard. It's hard to be a good parent.
It is. But I think that's huge, what you just said. It's essentially taking responsibility for your part of the interaction as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're going to have reactions and we're going to have interactions and we're going to, stay up until 2:00 in the morning just thinking of like how we reacted. And instead of doing that, maybe just talk to your child or talk to your teen about it.
Beautiful. So I really like this theory. Now, I can imagine, and I'm kind of experiencing this right now. My daughter is now 20, and she's my stepdaughter, but she's my emotional daughter. So I met her when she was 7 years old, so I kind of missed the foundation part of her, and even then, I didn't grow to be a better parent until she was already in her teens. So, what about parents who have a 15, 16, 17-year-old who are hearing this for the first time and they're thinking maybe, oh man, I should have done this, or I wish I would have listened to this, 10 years ago. What can they do now if they have older teens?
Yeah, I have a husband like that. And I get that completely, right? He's my son's dad, and he met him when he was 8. And it's hard to grow into a relationship, right? Mm-hmm. When you miss some part of it. I will say that you only look forward, you don't look back. And then you can acknowledge, what you didn't or what you weren't able to give, because you didn't know. When my husband married into myself and my son's family, and we were like a family unit. It was like me and my kid, and we were gonna like rule the world, right? And here's my husband who came into this and walked into it. We were doing all sorts of weird things like practicing attachment parenting and homeschooling and the kid, so there was a lot to grow into. And it took a while. It really did. It took a while for us to sort of like be able to maintain our bearings together as like a 3-person family unit. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we're constantly doing now, one of the things I see in my husband is he's constantly like moving forward and making sure like the relationship is okay now, today. And also, apologizing for things he didn't know about. Like he'll say to my son, like, I'm sorry I gave you such a hard time for being homeschooled. I didn't realize the joys of it, right? Because I walked into it and I was just like, why doesn't like this kid go to school? But he didn't realize until later the joys of the choice we were making, whatever it was. So we move forward. And you move forward with patience and kindness and understanding. And I can say in terms of our family, I mean, it's made our little family grow really, really strong. We all know that like everyone in this family has each other's back. Um, and that was really important to me from the beginning, and we got it maybe later on.
That's awesome. So it's never too late to apply this theory into your child's life.
Heck no. I mean, 20s, 30s, 40s, right? Like, however old your child is, like, talk to them, and make sure that they know that they're loved and that they're cared for, and listen. I think the listening part is really important.
That's awesome. So